Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be talking about 5 things you must know to take your next app to the next level. My name is Ankita Kulkarni and I'm a senior engineering manager at WealthSimple. I am part of the growth org at WealthSimple and it has been a fun journey so far. I've been working in the industry for the past 10 years and built all types of applications, all the way from greenfield to production, and also taken a lot of existing applications to production and scale them as well. Today, my topic is 5 things to take your next app to the next level. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. So, when it comes to taking your apps to the next level, there are a few important things that come to mind. One is performance, optimizations that we can make along the way, caching data on CDNs, and so on, right? There are a few things. Today, we are going to be talking about a few things that I think will help take your app to the next level. One, SEO. Second, loading and redirect. Third, incremental static regeneration. Then image optimization, and lastly, caching. So let's get started. SEO with Next.js. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. Let's talk about what exactly is SEO first. When your app gets deployed, your bot goes ahead and crawls the page. The minute it crawls the page, it is then going to understand what's on the page. Once it understands what's on the page, it is then going to go ahead and rank your page. Now, just like you and I, we are communicating in English, Mr. Bot is going to go ahead and take a look at your HTML to understand what's on your page. So it's extremely important to set up your meta tags, titles, use proper HTML semantics, and so on. There are a lot of things about SEO. It is then going to go ahead and display on the page. Now, it's extremely important that you get your SEO right, because that is how you're going to get a lot of users. The minute users are going to search for a specific search term, you want your specific site to go ahead and pop up right there on the first page. So SEO is important. Now, what I really love about Next.js is that it really makes it easy for developers and gives developers such a good developer experience when it comes to implementing SEO. A lot of the things are done out of the box, but a few things that we can add on to is the Next.js head component. But first, let's take a look at a demo and then we can go from there. So this is an app called Meow Props. As we know, on Twitter, there's a lot of debate, a lot of heated arguments going on Twitter. I built this app to essentially give props to someone you really like, someone you really appreciate. Now, in this specific app, you can go ahead and add your Twitter ID and their Twitter ID, and then accordingly, it's going to generate a unique link for you that you can share with them and tweet about it. That it's also going to go ahead and randomly assign a compliment to that specific tweet as well. And all this is built with Next.js using the power of incremental static regeneration. And we will take a look at soon in that specific section. But for now, let's focus on SEO. So now, for Meow Props, as we see right here, we have 2 input boxes. So let's go ahead and add our Twitter ID and their Twitter ID. So their Twitter ID could just be another awesome person. And our Twitter ID is my Twitter ID, which is Kulkarni Ankita 9. And here it has gone ahead and generated this unique link with some random number. Now we can go ahead and preview the page. The minute we do that, you can see how there is a meow emoji, right? But also a random compliment that has been picked from my JSON list of compliments. And it says you're awesome. Now, this specific content and this specific page is generated using incremental static regeneration. Now, isn't that amazing? So here it has gone ahead and opened up my Twitter and then accordingly gone ahead and shown the unique link generated for me. Now I can copy this link and head over to Card Validator. Card Validator is provided via Twitter, a tool that will help you essentially identify the SEO for your specific URL, right? How exactly will it look like the minute you share the specific link? So let's paste the URL that we just copied and preview card. And now you can see this is exactly how users will see. Now, isn't that amazing? It has gone ahead and picked up the Mia emoji from our page right here. And also, the description is thank you for being an awesome person. Isn't that exciting? So now let's take a look at the code and understand exactly how we would build this and configure this. Here we can basically look at some of the code. So now this is the head component and these are all the meta tags that are responsible for setting the title, the description, and so on. Now you can also go ahead and set the image as well. And next, these are all the meta tags specifically for Twitter. And if you use these specific meta tags for Twitter, you're definitely going to get extra bonus points because Twitter recognizes these cards. So the card validator looks at these specific cards to understand exactly how it will configure your specific URL and how it's going to go ahead and share it with other users. So you can see Twitter description, Twitter image, creator, card, title, and so on. So that's the beauty of Next.js, that we can easily just use the head component and pass in the meta tags, and it is going to go ahead and append to the head of the page. Now, isn't that amazing? The next thing is script optimization. Now, script optimization is definitely one of my favorites feature of Next.js. Script optimization essentially allows you to optimize your script. So for example, if there is a specific JavaScript file or any specific scripts that you want to essentially load on the page, you can use the script component from Next.js. And using that component, you can pass in properties such as before interactive, after interactive, and so on. Before interactive would essentially give it a higher priority and load it before the page loads, right? But after interactive would be after the page has completely rendered, it is going to go ahead and load the specific script. Now, in our case, by default, it's after interactive. So after the page has fully loaded, it has gone and rendered the script. Now, in our example right here, if we don't use a script component, this specific widget is not going to work at all. So that specific script is extremely important. But using the script component, it has essentially figured out how to best optimize it and provided us with additional abilities like that. So SEO with Next.js is really fun and you can do a lot more stuff with it. Loading and redirects. Let's take a look at an example for what I mean by that. Let's say we have a login page and a home page. On success of login, we want the user to be redirected to the home page and also show some loading state in the middle. And let's say there's an error, then we want the user to stay on the login page and then show an error right here. Now login has some async handle login request function that we trigger, right? And then accordingly, we use the router, the Next.js router, to push the user to either home page or stay on the login page itself. Now, what exactly happens here is when we click on login, that's when we execute the code and accordingly can redirect. It's pretty straightforward in that sense because we know exactly what we want to do here. But let's say now the user is already logged in, right? And they go away and they come back after 10 days or so. And then the minute they do that, they directly go to the home page and all the content on the home page is server-side rendered itself. And then you see fancy image right here. So the minute they come to the home page directly, what we want is we still want this loading text and we don't even want to show the user fancy image at all if in case the user is not logged in. If in case the user is not logged in or the session has expired and so on. But let's take a look at an example for what actually happens then. So this is a Netflix application and you can see that the minute we go to the home page, loading text, Flickr, login page, right? And this is exactly what we want to avoid in a lot of applications. So let's take a look at what's the difference in Next.js here and how is React getting rendered and how the server-side rendering content works. So this is an example of the code that was the initial Flickr example, right? This is a code example for that. So now right here we have the router, and based on if the user is logged in or not, we redirect them to home or the login page. And in return, we are also returning the component as well. And all this is underscore app.js file, which is the entry point of our application. Now, what happens is just because React has not even been initialized here, it has to still load on the client before the code can be evaluated even. So it's just better to use JavaScript in that case, right? So anytime there's an async call, this might happen. And then we go ahead and return the component itself. And component itself comes from my app. So this is going to be every page in the application, right? So just because React has still to load on the client, what essentially happens is this specific code is not even evaluated yet. And because of that, at the bottom, the component gets returned, which is our home page in that case, as the user goes to the root page itself. So how can we fix this? What is a good solution for that? Well, one potential solution is to use the Next.js router and subscribe to routing events. So that is, the minute the route change is complete, we turn the loading to false, but by default, show the loading component the minute the user routes, right? And this code works for sure, but it is not an ideal solution. Because why use the router for checking for the loading state and all that, right? It seems a bit odd. So the next solution could be to essentially using a script tag and then adding the document.cookie value itself, right? That is, we add a cookie inside our cookies in the application and then accordingly redirect to home if the cookie exists. So setting the cookie accordingly and then redirecting to home. So this is one potential option that we could explore. Next, let's talk about incremental static regeneration. Now, I have seen and talked to a lot of developers who know about static generation. They know about server-side rendering. But incremental static regeneration is known by a very few. And it's incredibly powerful. I've used it quite a bit and it has really blown my mind away. It's amazing. It's the best of both worlds. You don't just get the benefit of static side generation, but you also get the benefit of server-side rendering. You essentially would be able to pre-build content, right, during the build phase before deployment. It will go ahead and essentially cache all this different static content, right? At the same time, you can also dynamically render server-side render code as well. Now, the meow props that we looked at, that uses incremental static regeneration because of how much I love it as well. So, what makes incremental static regeneration powerful? Let's take a look at the code. So now this is the example code from meow props app itself. So we have two functions here. One is get static props, other is get static paths. So towards the bottom, we are caching that specific value, that is the static content for those two Twitter IDs, right? And on top for get static props is when we are essentially server-side rendering the code as well. So for example, we are using the revalidate property and setting it to be 1 hour because it's in seconds, right? So setting it to be 1 hour. So after 1 hour, this cached content will no longer be cached and we are going to go ahead and regenerate the page the minute the user specifically goes to that page. But not on the first request, because on the first request, it is going to go ahead and request the page to download and get the latest complement. And in the second request is when you get the cache data again. So this specific get static props example really conveyed the idea how powerful incremental static regeneration is. Because you really get the best of both worlds. We are still caching one ID, but we are also getting and generating newer and newer IDs, and it's also cached for the next hour or so. So definitely check out incremental static regeneration if you haven't already. So if you have thousands and thousands of pages, then it really helps to essentially have the best of both worlds. Next, image optimization. Now, it's extremely important to make sure that images are optimized. Our web is full of images. Our sites are full of images. Images are really good visual content that really help understand the site better, right? If you have an e-commerce website, then an image will really help you a lot. It's full of images on that specific web page. In the entire site, you have a lot of different images. Now, it's extremely important to make sure that you go ahead and optimize those images. Otherwise, your site's performance is really going to suffer. So here are two ways which I think you can easily go ahead and optimize your images. One is cache images on CDN. So it doesn't matter if you have an e-commerce site or not. If you do have an hero image, for example, you can easily go ahead and store that image on the CDN. That way, it is not going to go ahead and fetch a new image every time. It's just going to return the cache content. The next thing is using source set. Next.js image component is really powerful. It is also going to go ahead and based on the viewport, it is going to download the specific image. But you can also provide source set, provide also different breakpoints to Next.js as well, and then provide the necessary images as well. So that specific viewport will have a specific image. So that on a mobile device, you're not downloading a huge image for a desktop, right? You don't want the image to pixelate as well. So that's the advantage of Next.js image component, but some of the image optimizations that you can do here. And lastly, caching. It's incredibly important to cache your site if you want performance site. Performance is equivalent to caching. You can cache, you should cache whatever you can cache. Think about it this way. How much stale content can you have? If that content can go stale for a little bit, go do it because that is going to help you a lot, especially if you have like millions of users. Imagine millions of users coming to your site and re-downloading content over and over. That is not something what you want. It is going to also put a lot of server load as well. So caching is extremely important, especially in the case of server-side rendering. Now this function is get server-side props. It's extremely important to essentially combine server-side rendering with caching because using server-side rendering without caching can really lead to poor performance. Every millisecond matters. Now imagine in server-side rendering, you are refetching content each and every time from the server. This is putting a lot of load on the server. By setting the specific response header to be cache control, it is going to go ahead and only fetch content every so often. It's not going to fetch on each and every request. So this value is considered fresh for the first 10 seconds because of the max age property. But if a request is repeated within the next 10 seconds, the previously cached value will essentially still be fresh, right? But if the request is repeated before 59 seconds, the cached value will be stale. But after, it won't be, it will be fresh. And that's the advantage of stale while revalidate property as well, where we have set it to 59. So the cache value will stale, but still render because of stale while revalidate. But in the background, it is going to go ahead and make a revalidation request to populate the cache to the fresh value as well. So if you refresh the page, you will see the new value. So that's the advantage of setting cache control headers with server-side rendering because you don't want your performance to be impacted at all. Now, and having said that, that's all the 5 things you can do to take your next app to the next level. But bonus for you, there's one more thing that you can do to take your next app to the next level. And that is, I have built a Next.js course that takes every developer from a beginner developer to all the way to an advanced developer, a senior developer. So definitely check this course out. A lot of hard work has gone into that. You are going to be really confident with Next.js towards the end of this course. And definitely check this link out because if you do, you are going to also take advantage of some discount that I have specifically created for this specific conference. As part of this course, you will be learning not just the fundamentals of Next.js, but you will be also building an application like Netflix, which is a pretty complex app in Next.js, but also learning technologies like Hasura, serverless magic, functionality, database, serverless functions, framer motion, and so on. There's lots more to check out. So definitely do, and please let me know on Twitter if you do like it and if you do check it out, what your thoughts are and so on. Anyway, having said that, thank you so much for listening and have a really fun time at the conference.